Hello guys, it's me Jet Rainwing. It's me Jet and the Blue Dragon once again, and this time if you watched my other past video, is that I said that video was an intro as to what I was going to talk about, how possibly the universe works. Well, apparently this section is going to be talking about redshift and how the universe itself is not necessarily expanding. As for that, I will explain why. I will explain why the universe may not be expanding, but rather it's pretty much a misleading term. And so, most of this, if not yet all of this, was based on my knowledge alone. I just had some resources that I did, but most of the part it was mostly done by me. Mostly some hardcore deep thinking and stuff like that. And one of the things I'm saying is that one of the reasons why that the universe is not expanding the way we think it is for one, we think of like the universe expanding just because of redshift, or it's probably because of space expanding the molecules. An interesting theory, no doubt about that. But the problem with that is that for one, that for something that lacks with the Big Bang, Heat Death, and Big Rip, is that they all fail to explain the nature of gravity. I know for sure some of you might say, oh, like gravity will crush the galaxies, they will become isolated, and then they'll just disappear, nothing happens ever again. Well, that's possible, but the issue with that is that but the irony about that is that the Big Rip, the Big Bang, and Heat Death doesn't explain anything needed to form in the first place. It's kind of like if you say that like nothing will ever, if you say that every single galaxy will just burn itself out and become isolated, then the irony is that why did anything need to start in the first place then? It's nothing more than a slap in the face. In fact, here's some inlinks and here's some videos and some other observations that I have learned or taught myself on how the universe may not be, if not yet, pretty much is not expanding due to redshift alone. Sorry if you guys, so one of the things is that how the universe may not necessarily be expanding is that for one, we see objects like like how I said about earlier about like the Big Rip, Heat Death, and all that, whatever. Well, the irony about that is that, like what I said, is that sure, you could say like galaxies will eventually all get crushed into each other and then eventually become isolated, and they will never react with one another ever again. Well, the irony about that is that, well, here's an image model of the Big Bang. It's not so clear as to if you guys can see it or not, but as you see, it doesn't explain anything about the nature of gravity. It just explains like, okay, there was a sudden bang for who knows what reason, created stars, created galaxies, and then eventually with the Hubble constant, they will eventually be colliding with one another, and they will possibly become isolated and burn themselves out. Well, and that's a possibility, that is possibly the explanation of heat death. The explanation of Big Rip almost says the exact same thing, except for being in a Hubble constant, galaxies will suddenly increase to the point that they will rip that the atoms will be completely ripped apart. Well, the irony about that is that that's another possibility, but the thing is that they all fail to explain this point right here, is that if the universe itself will never exist again because either galaxies will burn themselves out or atoms will be completely destroyed, that doesn't explain why anything needed to form in the first place if there was nothing to be created. And so there's a universal law as that you can't create something from nothing, or should I say you can, but you need a cause and an effect. Without a cause, there is no effect. And so one of the YouTube videos or series that really got me into this was of how one of the videos, or some videos that are very interesting to me, is that a series that you can watch is that one of the series is called Seconds from Disaster. And so it's a series on how it's a documentary that explains on how things just can't happen. Is that they may seem like they happen all of a sudden, but in reality they don't. Things come like without a cause, like as I said before, without a cause there is no effect. You need for something to happen, if not yet anything in the world, no matter where you are, you need a cause and an effect. The universe is no different. And so in order for that Big Bang to happen, you need to figure out why it happened, how it happened, whatever. And that's the issue with, and that's the flaw that Big Bang, heat death, and the Big Rip failed to explain, is that they explain the fact that they explain exactly what will happen in the end of the universe, or the possibilities, but they don't explain the beginning, or the beginning of the universe is slightly flawed. And so according to how science works, and especially with nature, you can't just create something out of thin air. It doesn't work like that. Even something that happens so suddenly, we think it happens from 0 to 100, but in reality it happens from 10 to 20 to 30 to 40 to 50, etc. It just seems like certain spikes happen so fast, but in reality it's just a constant wave of going like from 10s to 20s to 30s, etc. It's just on a short period of time. And so with this, here's a slightly intro as to what the series is called. Or at least if you're interested in science and stuff like that, I recommend you guys watch the series called Seconds from Disaster. Here's a small intro of it from YouTube, if you're interested.
Disasters don't just happen, they're a chain of critical events. Unravel those fateful decisions in the final Seconds from Disaster.
So that's only one of the videos that I am interested in. Another one is called Destroyed in Seconds. And this video, or at least in this series, talks about, in this particular this particular documentary, talks about a series of multiple things, but in reality, so this series talks about multiple events at once, simultaneously, and it goes over the little it goes over the smaller details as to like why did this happen and how. It's not necessarily as deep as it is, unlike the other one that I showed you called Seconds from Disaster, but nonetheless it's still a very interesting documentary, and I hope you guys check it out. Here's just a intro of one of their documentaries of episode 23.
ever be the same. Ever. Get ready to experience some of the most destructive mayhem ever captured on camera. An entire neighborhood is left in ruins when a Canadian propane plant is rocked by multiple explosions. And a sheriff chases a violent twister as it chews a path of destruction through a small Texas town. This is your warning. This is not a test. This is destroyed in seconds.
And so those are some of the series or videos that I would recommend that you guys watch if you are very interested in some stuff that may be flawed about the Big Bang, heat death, and stuff like that. But anyway, as I was saying, going back to redshift, just because that something is red, that doesn't technically mean it's just moving away from us, in quote. As for how we see, even from our perspective of how the universe is that when we see constellations, we see them in a 2D scale. An example of this would be the Big Dipper. The most famous, if not one of the most famous constellations ever. And so as you can see, that's what we see from our point of view. It's just a Big Dipper. And so what we don't see, however, is the stars, or at least the kind of stars that are there. And what I mean by that is that to us it looks flat. And a little experiment that you can do is I have modeled the Big Dipper out of some Hot Wheels cars that I have. And so those cars represent stars. My room represents space around them. And so as you see, or at least what the model is, from our point of view, it looks flat. It looks flat, just like how we see it. However, yep, there we go. As you can see, it looks flat. But however, what the thing is that we don't understand, or at least what many scientists don't understand, is that you can't just look at it from a flat surface. You have to look at it from a 3D surface. Is that instead of looking at it flat, what we don't know is the 3D objects that make up the we don't see the actual, this is what we see, but we don't actually exactly see the 3D shape as to where, how the stars are connected. If you see these cars right here, it looks flat. If not yet, most of them look flat. And so you would think that, oh, all of them are based, or if not yet, most of them are in the same place, and the red one and the red Ferrari this right here is the closest. All the other ones mean either, and you see that red is furthest and the blue is the farthest. No, wait, you see that blue is the closest and red is the farthest. However, what if I were to tell you that that is not true? As I showed you before, this is how I really laid it down. If you can see it, as you see, just because that the cars are red doesn't make them far away. It can make them far away, but redshift alone doesn't mean distance. Another example of this is some of my equipment, or at least some of my natural things at home. Just because you can't see them, or only minor lights, just because that they have a red light or a blue light, doesn't mean that they are far away. In fact, here's another experiment that I have done. You can't really see my room from here that much. You can see my laptop, but you can't really see anything else in here. However, you might see some stuff here and there, but nothing really too bizarre. However, as I get closer, you can see a little bit of blue, maybe a little red dot. But if I were going to tell you which one's the closest, you would probably think of, you would probably say the blue one, obviously because you say blue shift means it's closer. Well, unfortunately, I hate to tell you the truth, but that is actually misleading. The blue one is actually the farthest, and the red is actually the closest to me. How is this possible? I'll show you. As you see, what we see is only from this space, from our point of perspective. However, as like with the cars, you can't just only look at it from a 2D surface or from an observation. You have to look at it from the side view as well. And so that little dot that you saw was actually coming from my TV. And so, as I show you this way, as you see, whoops. I don't know if you guys can see. I don't know if you guys can see it or not, because I don't know how to switch my camera on this. Well, I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but okay, there we go. But if you guys can see it, if you guys can, the TV is actually more closer than the fan itself, which means that this red light is actually closer to me. This red light right here that you saw earlier is actually more closer than the blue light you see right here. Another science experiment that I have done is I went to Italy not too long ago, some point this year, and I was in a hot tub. And so the hot tub itself was changing from blue to green. From blue to red. And as you see right here, as I will show you in a second when this thing lights up, as you see right here, the universe itself, I would be standing in space right now. So this is a video of me taking a video of a pool or of a spa This is a video that I have taken in Italy of a jacuzzi in Italy. And so what thing I have done, and this video is not, this video is raw footage. It's not edited in any sort of way. And you will watch in this video, I'm not moving, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just standing in one place, and you will see the colors right here will change from blue to purple to red. Even though that the colors change, I am not the one who's moving. The universe works the same way. Space alone does not expand. It's actually the molecules that produce light change their environment. So even though that redshift, something that is redshifted can be far away, it shouldn't be always taken into account. Anyway, here's what it looks like in raw footage. As you guys can see, I'm not expanding the molecules. I'm just letting the molecules just do their own thing. I'm not stretching the jacuzzi or anything. That's how redshift alone does not necessarily or guarantee that is expanding. Some other videos or whatever that you might see say that the universe is expanding due to lights, like this one right here.
Now, the usual explanation for this redshift is that as the light is traveling through expanding space, the photons themselves become stretched, so short wavelengths get longer. and this is known as cosmological redshift. And the explanation is fairly intuitively satisfying, and most people go on without giving it a second thought. But the problem is, if you do give it a second thought, you think, well, if expanding space can stretch something like a photon, something that's so incredibly tiny, does it also stretch atoms and molecules? Is expanding space stretching stars and galaxies? And what about you? Are you expanding with the universe?
And so, based on how this video that I showed you with the hot tub, is that as you can see, the universe or the hot tub itself does not expand. As you see what I showed you from the hot tub, it goes from red, and then back to blue. And so as you see, it's not the hot tub that is expanding. The hot tub is just the exact same shape as it was before when it was blue shifted. Or at least, when it was blue shifted. I am not expanding. The hot tub is not expanding. It's just the molecules that create light within the hot tub change color from red to blue, and then you might see some purple in there. That's how another thing is that how we say, like, the universe is expanding due to redshift is misleading. Another thing is this. Another YouTube example is this, right? This one right here.
If a galaxy was moving away from an observer on the Earth, the spectral lines would shift to the red end of the spectrum. This is known as a redshift. The further the spectral lines are shifted, the faster the galaxy is moving away from the observer, and the further away the galaxy is from the Earth. Astronomers such as Edwin Hubble measured the spectral lines of hundreds of galaxies in the visible universe and found that most galaxies display a redshift. This led to the conclusion that the galaxies were moving away from the Earth and that the universe must be expanding.
And so, with that, the thing with Edward Hubble didn't have the chance to explain is that they didn't have the technology that we do now. Even if you look at some of the telescopes that we have now, the Hubble telescope is not the same as it's the James Webb telescope. So what he could be looking at is only a small portion of what's to come. If you look at some of the images, like the Pillars of Creation from Hubble, and the new one or the recent one called the James Webb telescope, instead of seeing less, we're actually seeing more. So that's something that it doesn't add up. Is that if you say that the universe is expanding from Hubble and the James Webb telescope, we would see less. But when we actually did the experiments and actually made the telescope better, from the Pillars of Creation, we see more stuff and not less. And so that's the thing what Edward Hubble didn't fully explain. And so just because that something is technically red, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that it is considered moving away, per se. It's only just basically the chemical reactions from molecules that give off light in which we see it. In fact, how in the video it explains is that from Earth, from the wavelengths, is that how redshift, if something is red and it's moving away from Earth, then that means it's moving away from us. And then blue means it's coming towards us. Well, the irony about that is that within the next 4 billion years or so, the sun will expand into a red giant, and the light from the sun will be then red shifted. So the irony about that is that you can't say, oh, like this, because it doesn't make sense, because you can't say the sun is moving away from Earth if it's red shifted, and it's blue shifted and it's moving towards Earth, because what we see is the opposite effect. What we see is that as the sun expands as the sun gets into a red giant, the sun the sun's main color or its function will release red light, therefore being redshifted. And so eventually the sun will expand, perhaps engulfing Mercury, Venus, even Earth. But as the video states, redshift means it's moving away from us. And that's the flaw that many scientists don't understand or can't accept. Just because that something is red, that doesn't guarantee that it's moving away. As I showed you some of the experiments with the jacuzzi, and even basic knowledge that our own sun will one day be redshifted, coming towards us, that just proves it to you that how redshift alone does not guarantee expansion. When scientists say that the universe is expanding, they are only half right. As for redshift can mean distance, but it should not be guaranteed. But just because something is red, that doesn't guarantee distance. So yeah, as you guys saw, like some of the demonstrations that I showed you, the little experiments, the little videos that I showed you, I really hope you guys learn a little something here. If you guys have some more interesting questions about redshift or just like some hardcore stuff you guys want to know, let me know in the comments below, and I will gladly answer them if I can. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and hope you guys learned something. If there's anything you guys want me to, talk about, well, I will. But yeah, the next time I will talk about the topic I'm going to talk about is actually a hypothesis that I created myself earlier this year on January 15th, 2023. As for the thing with Stephen Hawking is that he says that black holes exist. Well, black holes may not exist. As I have found out is that the irony about galaxies and hurricanes look very identical. And so it was a hypothesis myself that I created. I will explain it to you more detail next time in the video, or at least next video, as I call it the GHCT, or the GHCH, the Galaxy Hurricane Creation Hypothesis. In that time, I hope you guys learned a little something about redshift. In that case, peace out.